Do you like adorable, wholesome romance? Do you like boy meets boy, girl meets girl, friend meets friend? All of it. Well, my friends, and you need to check out Netflix's Heartstopper. Hi guys, welcome back, bienvenue, and all that jazz. It's time to talk about some stuff. Today, in particular, I'm going to be talking about my thoughts, feelings, emotions about the new Netflix adaptation of the graphic novel series Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. And so the format of this review is going to be I'll give some general thoughts, we'll chat a little bit about the characters and the plot in a very non-spoiler way, and then I'm going to segue into a little bit more personal stuff. So hopefully you stick around for that, but I'm going to talk about why I think that adaptations or just stories like this in general are such important representation and what they can mean to somebody even like me who's a little bit older. I'm 31 going on 32, which in gay years is basically dead. And I'm just going to talk about why this story in particular kind of touched me and some of my experiences growing up that kind of got reflected in this show. Again, I'll keep it as non-spoiler as possible. I won't bring up any character names or plot specifics. It will be very vague, just to kind of get my thoughts and feelings out there. And if you are somebody like me who is queer, questioning, bi, trans, whatever part of the rainbow spectrum, I hope that you can maybe relate and talk to me down in the comments or over in my Instagram. My DMs are always open if you need a safe space to talk. I'm here for you. And so let's just jump right into kind of spoiler-free thoughts, feels about Heartstopper. And I think you can already tell I loved this show with every fiber of my being. It was so sweet, so wholesome. It was so representative of many of the experiences that many queer people go through while they're growing up, especially in high school or secondary school, as they call it across the pond. And I think that representation is just really important and really meaningful to people. And it was also one of the first adaptations that I've seen that there wasn't some tragedy that befell the romance. So typically, like if I'm thinking back, the queer romances that I've seen growing up, we have stuff like Brokeback Mountain, Rent, and stories like those, or the Laramie Project, all of these kinds of things that are they are very important and very impactful, but they are very sad and depressing. Like people die, people get HIV/AIDS and pass away from it. Call Me By Your Name is also kind of depressing. It does not have that happy ending. And so just having like queer romance presented in a way that was just like so full of hope and just carried you away in the like simple romance and that blooming first love that, to be honest, I feel like heterosexual people take that kind of story for granted. But if you think about it, the only other story similar that I have seen is something like Love, Simon or Love, Victor. And if I can count the number of stories that just show queer romance as just romance, and if I can count them on less than the fingers of one hand, I think you can see why like this representation can be so meaningful for people. So this show, out of all doubt, was 5 out of 5 stars. There were sweet character moments. There was personal conflict between characters, but it was never over the top or dragged out. It was always resolved in meaningful ways, and it was just precious and everything you could ever hope for. This story is basically the story of two boys who meet and fall in love, and it deals with questioning your sexuality, trying to figure yourself out when you feel these feelings for the first time. What does it mean? Dealing with societal pressures, especially from your peers, of what you think looks cool, or all of these things that people are very familiar with and have experienced throughout high school, and just brings it into a more queer-focused setting. And I was here for every step of the way. There was male-male romance, there was female-female romance, there is friends to lovers type romance. It is just so cute, so sweet, everything you could possibly want from a show like this. And I cannot recommend it highly enough. if you have watched this show, please squeal with me down in the comments or on Insta or wherever. Like, I need to talk to more people about this show, because literally I've been messaging all of my friends and being like, hey, have you watched Heartstopper? And they're like, no, what's that? And I'm like, ho! Watch it. And then come talk to me about it, because it is just so sweet and so cute and everything. And I think one of the real strengths of this show is, while having this through line of hope and love and acceptance and coming into who you are, it also touches on some of the very real problems that especially queer people face. Discrimination, bullying, negative self-image, and very negative dark thoughts. Like, these are real things that queer people go through. And I really thought that the way that the show touched on these things in meaningful ways, without turning the tone of the show overall incredibly dark, was like perfection. Because it's impossible, kind of in our current day and age, unfortunately, it's impossible to talk about growing up queer or other in kind of any way, shape, or form without having to also couple that conversation with things like discrimination and bullying and homophobia and any kind of phobia. All of those things really do play into people's experiences growing up, and being able to touch on those but also show the hope and resolution in those really gives me hope for our society, that I hope that people stick up for each other more in high school now than they did when I was younger, that there are more supporters, more of an awareness and a shift in our culture towards just being accepting of people as people and not necessarily needing to label every last inch of their being. And I truly hope that that is the direction that our world is going, and just being able to immerse myself in a world where the friend group was so strong and always supportive of each other despite sometimes having disagreements, and showing confronting of bullying and all of those things. It was just a really special experience, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. So if you have not yet checked out Heartstopper on Netflix, I would highly recommend you do so. It is also an adaptation from a graphic novel series that I have not yet read, because I do not own it, because graphic novels are kind of expensive. But like, I cannot wait to get my hands on it and just dive into the story again. I kind of want to already rewatch the show because it was just that good. And so with that, I think I'll kind of wrap up the first part of my chat of like my general thoughts, feelings, etc. on this show. And I'm going to talk about why I think representation like this is so meaningful and so important, especially to me. So if you have any kind of triggers for thoughts of self-harm or abuse or bullying or any of those kinds of things, you may want to click off the video now. And I hope that you watch Heartstopper and then come back and talk to me about it. But if you want to know more about someone's personal experience of what it was like growing up gay in the United States of America in the early 2000s, then stick around, because I'm going to chat a little bit about that. So I don't want to get into some stuff that happened pre-high school. It was very dark, and I'm just not really totally ready to share that part, especially not in like a very public forum like this. But I will say that I was out and gay throughout my entire high school. I was one of maybe two, but I was really the main openly gay person in my 1,200 person school that I knew of. And so being out is both a blessing and a curse, because one, yes, you are getting to share your true authentic self with people, but you also open yourself up as a target for the more negative sides of certain people. So I grew up in a relatively small town, and we were just a couple towns over from this town that had neo-Nazi movements. There would pop up in the newspaper pictures of people with their shaved heads and their tattoos of swastikas. And so like, while I did grow up in California, I think that the area that I grew up in was surprisingly reserved, surprisingly homophobic and otherphobic, and it was not the safest place to be out loud and proud. And so when I was in high school, I did have to deal with all of those bullying, all of those different things. And so you got to see these moments in the show that I thought were like done artistically beautifully, of bullying and the toll that that can take on your psyche. And there's one scene in particular where one of the characters walks into a locker room and you can see his just uncomfortableness of being in that situation. Because to be frank, like the locker room is basically like the 7th layer of hell sometimes when you're a gay kid in high school, because you're afraid that people are going to think that you're checking them out even though you're not. So I personally actually dealt with I'm going to try not to get very emotional about it. So there were times that I would get like cornered in the locker room. People would put things in my locker. And it was just like a very dark place for me. Like I literally would like get anxiety when I thought about having to go into the locker room. There was physical altercations. It got so bad that I was offered and basically told that I should change in like a bathroom outside of the locker room to like not have to enter that space, because the administration at my school basically didn't know what to do or how to get involved or any of those kinds of things. And so I dealt with those kinds of things, especially like centered around the locker room. So seeing that scene, I was just like instantly like thrown back to that time in my life. And I don't think that people realize that like that kind of stuff still happens to people. You know what I mean? Like people think that, oh, we're in 2022, so culture has come so far. Everybody is so much more accepting now, but that's really like not the case for everybody, especially depending on where in the country or where in the world you live. Like there are many places still where it's just not safe to be out or proud or any of those things. And so from what I remember, I think that was like my sophomore year where I started having really strong issues with bullying in the locker room or at lunch and those kinds of places. And so another thing that I saw in the show was one of the characters spends many of their lunch periods in a classroom with one of their teachers, and I could not relate more strongly. That was literally me. I felt so uncomfortable and so unsafe just being out and eating my lunch, and I got so tired of being picked on and like singled out that I would eat lunch in a classroom with one of my teachers because I felt safe there. And then as you're growing up, when you're kind of exposed to these very negative opinions on a daily basis, you kind of internalize a lot of that stuff. And I'll admit, like, there were some very dark years, especially junior and senior year of high school. Similar to a character in this show, there's a moment where one of the characters talks about how sometimes they feel like the world would be a better place if they didn't exist. And I can remember very vividly having those thoughts and feelings. Like, I thought that it was my fault that like me being there made people uncomfortable and that there was something wrong with me. And so I used to very much think those things too. I used to think about that all the time. Like, maybe people would be better off if I didn't exist. All I do is I hurt the people that are around me. And so maybe if I wasn't here, their lives would be better. And all I can say to you, if you're feeling like a similar kind of way, is like, that's so not true. The world is not a better place without you. The people around you are just not the right people. And just remember, I know people say it all the time, oh my goodness, that life gets better, especially after high school. And that's so true. You get to find and surround yourself with people that are meaningful to you and who support you. And unlike high school, you're not just like locked in small spaces with people who may not agree with you or may not like you or whatever. So just please, like, if anybody needs to hear this, like, that is not true. You are great. You are special. You deserve the world. You deserve happiness and love and support. And so just know that. And if you ever need somebody to listen to, like I said, please find me on Instagram. My DMs are always open if you need to talk. But kind of continue the story, oh my goodness, I'm a mess. When I started feeling those kinds of ways, that type of way, I kind of like overwhelmed my schedule so that I didn't have time to sit and think because I didn't like being with myself. So I took, I think it was like 5 AP classes in my junior year, plus the 6th period, plus the 0 period, plus I was involved in plays and track and cross country and dance and martial arts. I like overwhelmed my schedule so there's basically almost no times that I was alone. I also kind of took a not so great path. I used to sneak out of my room. My friends and I would drink alcohol together in like my car or in the park next to my house. And it was just a really destructive time for me. And at that time in my life, my relationship with my mom was kind of at its weakest. So I love my mom dearly, and we have come a very long way since then. But I will say that because of some of those behaviors and because of the way that I perceived her accepting or not accepting me at the time, our relationship was in a very bad place. So my mother is, and still is to this day, a practicing Christian woman. And so I always got the vibe that she loved me, but there was parts of my life that I felt like she was uncomfortable with and really did not want to go there. And so I really did not feel accepted by her at the time. I mean, we've come a very long way since then. I have pictures of my mom at Gay Pride with me, posing next to Gay Gandalf while he's flashing his inappropriate underwear and rainbow stockings. So she really has come a long way. But definitely at that time in my life, I felt like she didn't understand me, that she didn't accept me, and that she basically didn't want me around. And so I started doing some really bad things. Like, there were times that I would take money from her purse to buy alcohol or those kinds of things. And our relationship got to the point where she was basically on the verge of kicking me out of the house. Like, she didn't know what else to do with me. She was fed up with my behavior. Her sister in particular, or one of her sisters, because she has multiple, was very vocal about how she should just kick me out of the house. That I am just like this truant and this terrible person, and that I'm just draining her, and that she should just cut her losses. And mind you, at the time, I was 16, maybe going on 17, and so I didn't know what to do in those situations. And luckily, like, she never got to the point that she did that. But there are many people in our country, especially, that's a very real reality. Their parents just don't accept who they are, or whatever happens, and they are kicked out on the street. So if you look at like the statistics of how many homeless people identify as LGBT, it's shocking. Like, a very large majority of people who are homeless are these LGBT youth that have just been basically disowned by their parents. And that still happens to this very day. So all I can say to other queer people is, yes, coming out is wonderful, and being able to be very open and honest with who you are as a person is great. But just only do it when you feel ready to do it. Don't ever let somebody pressure you into feeling like you need to come out. Don't ever let like situations feel like you have to, or like you're not a proud gay person if you're not out. Like, sometimes your situation isn't safe, and nobody can know that but you. So just be very aware and don't put yourself in dangerous situations. And you can always choose who to come out to and when. That is part of your journey, and nobody gets to dictate that except for you. And so I will say that these days, post high school, right after the summer after I graduated, I met my current husband. I definitely was able to find my person, and I feel so blessed with where my life, oh my gosh. I feel so blessed with where my life is now. I have friends who support me no matter what. I have a husband who supports me no matter what. My mom is a very important person in my life. I have been trying to get closer to my brother, and I have a new nephew who is a few years old now. And so I just felt like it was important to be able to share kind of my story of how high school went, and how it can be one of the most like traumatic periods of your life, especially for queer people, when you're struggling with, who am I need to fit in, all of these things. And the people around you are so trained to kind of punish anybody for being other. And all I can say to you is, I love you. I support you. Be yourself. And if you are queer, questioning, or whatever, and just find your tribe to talk to about it, and only come out when you are ready to come out. And so with that, I'll kind of wrap this video up. I hope that you enjoyed Heartstopper if you've watched it, or you'll think about going and watch it, because even if you are not gay, LGBTQIAA, etc., at least it can give you like a glimpse into some of those harder moments while still being within a more uplifting and hopeful story. And hopefully if somebody out there relates to the things that I have gone through and wants to talk to me about it, like I said, I'm always here. And so with that, that's all I have for you today, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like or whatever engagement in any way you want. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!